episode of Tony Kent Writes and Cross-Examines. It's early in the morning, or certainly for me because I've overslept, and I don't feel in any condition to properly cross-examine, so we're just going to have a very cosy chat. So today we have the wonderful author Tammy Cohen joining us. Tammy is the author of psychological thrillers such as The Broken, When She Was Bad, Can't Read My Own Writing, First One Missing, and very shortly on the 14th of May, so today in fact, because we're doing the Graham Norton thing and we're pretending that we're doing this on the day it goes out, Stop at Nothing, which is Tammy's latest. Hi Tammy.
Hi Tony, how are you?
I'm very well, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Getting through it.
Are you handling the lockdown okay?
Just about. I mean, I think we're luckier than a lot. We don't have any small children kind of having to be homeschooled, which I think would be a nightmare. So in that regard, I can't complain. Got a garden. What more can you say? It's like riches in these times. No school-age children and a garden. That's like you hit the jackpot.
Well, we have a son who's just below school age, and we're just happy for him to remain illiterate until the time comes. Once he can go to school, they'll teach him there. You're living in North London, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, your book Stop at Nothing comes out on the 14th, which is today, as we've just explained.
Oh yes, so it is.
And tell us a bit about Stop at Nothing.
So Stop at Nothing is really about parental guilt and mother trying to redeem herself in the eyes of her daughter, her daughters, in fact. The main character is middle-aged, menopausal Tessa Hopwood, whose life is unravelling. Since she hit 50, she's lost her husband, she's lost her job, she's become estranged from her elder daughter. And when her younger daughter, Emma, is attacked in the street, Tessa believes that too is her fault, that she's taken her eye off the ball. The police are called in, a suspect is arrested, but the case collapses when Emma can't make a positive ID. Some weeks later, Emma spots the man who did it walking around the streets in their neighbourhood, and Tessa decides to take matters into her own hands. But what starts out as a simple desire to protect her daughter becomes an obsession that actually puts her family in greater danger than ever before. That's it.
That sounds fairly chilling. So it's a psychological thriller.
Yes, it's a psychological thriller.
And if you don't mind me asking, where did the idea come from? It's an intricate plot.
It is. Well, it was prompted by a real life incident which happened to my own daughter, who was herself attacked coming home from a party on her way back on the bus. She was followed off the bus by a man who tried to pull her down a side street, and she screamed, and he battered her a bit round the head, and then luckily somebody stopped on the other side of the road and he ran off, and that was that. But it was obviously a very traumatic incident, which the police treated as an attempted abduction, and we went through that identification parade, and I remember sitting behind her in the identification suite, the video suite, whatever they call it, and watching. I could see over her shoulder the video of the 9, I think it was, suspects. Yeah. The 9 men that
video
they've got.
Capture.
Yes, that's right. So they have like 9 or 8 volunteers and 1 the suspect. And I watched them all, and you're not, my daughter wasn't allowed to say anything until she'd seen it twice, and then they asked. It was very formalized. They have to ask us follow a certain script.
Yeah.
And I watched over her shoulder and had a very, very visceral reaction to one of the men that came up. It was completely, because I'd listened to her statement and I had built up a picture, as you do, and I was completely convinced that it was him. And she went through it twice, and then at the end they said, "And do you recognise the man who attacked you?" And she said no, and I was so shocked because I've been so convinced that it was this man.
Yeah.
And that was that. The case collapsed, and she did a few weeks later think that she saw him when she was coming home from school. But actually, given that it was a very traumatic incident, she got over it very quickly and very strongly, and she was fine. But it plays on your mind. I mean, as a parent, it plays on your mind all the time. Could this person be living in the next street to you? And then, could they go on and do it to somebody else? It's a very, it's a horrible thing when your sanctuary, your place where you live, doesn't feel safe anymore. And I think that's probably what psychological thrillers are mostly about, domestic thrillers anyway, when home, your place where you're supposed to feel safe, isn't safe anymore. And I think this lockdown is probably showing that up more than ever for a lot of very unfortunate people.
I mean, it's a harrowing inspiration for a book, but at the same time, I'm sure that helps you. I'm sure you feel the same. I hope you feel the same way. I'm sure that sort of brings some elements of realism into the whole thing. That the way you've actually had to live through that. Yeah.
Well, obviously, I know what I felt anyway. What emotions go through your mind, and it is an exploration. I mean, it happened to my daughter, and that is her story, and she is very incredibly resilient, and she's just got on with stuff. I mean, she was fine. I had to ask her, obviously, whether she minded me mining her awful experiences to make a book out of it, and she was absolutely fine with it. But it's not about being attacked, or because that is her story. It's about exploring as a parent how you feel when you feel that you've let your child down, even though that realistically there is nothing you could do.
Yeah.
But you all, that's a parent's lot, is to feel guilty, I think, to one extent or another.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting concept, though, isn't it? Because you say about being unsafe in your own home, and there are a lot of books about being unsafe in your own home, but actually it sort of extends it, doesn't it? It's almost your home, your neighbourhood is your home, but then you're not safe in the neighbourhood. Yeah,
exactly that. You're not safe in your own neighbourhood. It's about, mostly it's about guilt. It's parental guilt, and I think a lot of parents will recognise that, because I think a lot of us live in a permanent state of guilt. I mean, I've been reading, during this whole lockdown period, people, friends posting on Facebook who, they feel guilty because they're trying to work, they're trying to look after their children, they're not giving either the amount of time that they need, and obviously, if you have younger children in this time, they need a lot of attention. They're not going to school. They don't understand really what's happening, and it's up to you to explain everything. But at the same time, we don't really understand what's happening. So I'm sure there's an awful lot of parental guilt going on at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's even down to the most ridiculous level. Hopefully my wife won't watch this, so then I can say what I want. Just the other day, my son, who's 2, or he's almost 2, cut his finger. And he cut his finger on a pair of scissors. And my wife had the most extraordinary guilt meltdown for an entire day.
Oh,
that
God.
she'd let him down because she hadn't moved the scissors fast enough. And you think, there is such a thing as life.
Yes,
things happen.
I know.
But it's easy to say that, I guess.
Yeah, I know you can't wrap them up. But yes, I think we always feel that we could have done more, or done differently.
Yeah. So your previous books, so Stop at Nothing.
Photo, by the way, of the cover of
Oh, please do, yes. So Stop. It's been out in hardback, correct?
It's been out in hardback, and this is the today.
Yes.
Is the paperback launch, and it should be, as much as these things are in any shops at the moment, it should be in Tesco and Asda.
Wonderful. That's great news, because Tesco is. I didn't know Asda. I thought Asda weren't doing books, so I'm going to have to have a word with my publisher. But I know that Powerplay, my own release that came out last month, is in Tesco's, and actually has done really surprisingly well. So hopefully,
that's really good news. Yeah.
Well, so hopefully that's really promising for anything else that's in there. I think it could hopefully fly.
Well,
so people are looking for an escape.
Yeah, people are looking for escape, but obviously with the independent bookshops not being open, there's a limit to how they get to learn about books now. How do you know that the books are even there if you can't browse for them? This is
Which is why we're doing. It's why we're doing stuff like this, Tammy. Any excuse to get 2 or 3 people to know it's there.
Yeah.
You'll be happy to know that I did one of these interviews with Paddy McGrain the other day, and I know that it sold him at least 1 book. So, so it's worth that 15 minutes for 1 book.
It certainly is.
Hopefully it's more. So obviously this is not your first book. This is your 6th psychological thriller, or 5th?
I don't know. It's my 13th book altogether. But yes. I think it's 6th psychological thriller.
You've also written, haven't you, in what they call, I think they call it the women's genre. I don't understand why that is. Well, and historical fiction you write in? Yeah.
So at the moment, I started off writing what was called dark women's fiction, which actually is practically the same as psychological thrillers. There's very little between them. So that was the first 3 books. Then I went officially into psychological thrillers, and in the last few years I've written under the name Rachel Reese historical fiction.
I know this is not what we're here to talk about, but I love historical fiction. So quickly tell me what the first book is and what it's about, so I can buy it.
The first one was called Dangerous Crossing, and it was about it's set in 1939 on the brink of obviously World War II, about an young English woman who took advantage of the assisted passage scheme that there was then to travel on a ship from London to Sydney to go into domestic service, and it's set on board the ship over the 6 weeks of the voyage, where something terrible happens, and it opens with a woman being led off the ship in shackles on Sydney Harbour, as war is.
Is that how most people used to arrive in Sydney? But maybe a bit before that.
Yes.
No, that sounds. I love historical fiction. I know I'm supposed to be talking about crime writing. But I love historical fiction.
Well, I've got another Rachel Reese coming out next month.
Let's talk about that.
Yes, it's called Island of Secrets. I wonder if I've got a postcard. So that is
Island of Secrets. Okay.
Island of Secrets, and it's set in Havana in 1957.
You like to set things when bad stuff's about to happen, don't you?
Yes, well, everyone likes to set things in periods of flux. That's
interesting times.
Yes, well, yes. How many books are going to come out of these interesting times, I wonder?
Oh, God, yeah. Well, I don't know. I've had to cancel a book because it was too close for comfort. I was a third of the way into a book about a pandemic that was being utilised as a biological weapon by a rogue Asian state.
Oh, God, and you abandoned it?
I had to, because I just don't. I don't. A number of reasons. I don't feel comfortable profiting off of something that a lot of people are going to have died and will die.
Yeah.
And also, I couldn't write it while I was living it.
No.
So I've started something entirely new, and somehow, despite it being completely determinedly separate, COVID-19 has slipped in.
Well, I think it will. I think it will influence a lot of the work that's being written now, even if it's not specifically about that. It's like a lot of people that write in psychological thrillers that I've been talking to are finding it very hard to write, and I think maybe it's because psychological thrillers are about ordinary people being put in very extraordinary circumstances and having their psyches tested in a way they've never been tested before, and that's exactly what we're living through. So when you're living it, it's kind of hard to write. Everything you try and write becomes like a pale imitation of actual real life.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put yourself into someone's headspace when that headspace should be worried about things like how many feet are you from somebody who might be coughing. I
mean, we're living in the most extraordinary times that I've ever experienced.
Well, certainly, the World War II is now long enough ago that this is the most extraordinary times of anyone's lifetime, I guess. But tell me, I've just looked at the clock, and 15 minutes I've discovered flies. We've got 20 seconds left, so I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to say, Stop at Nothing, out today. Everybody go and buy it.
Yes.
Islands of Secrets, out in a couple of months. Everyone pre-order it. Tammy, 7 seconds left. Thank you very much for coming. Great to speak to you.